Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Coach Undress with Coaching with Undress. And ladies, thank you for tuning in to my channel. I always appreciate the support, the viewership, the comments, the subscribers, everything. Again, I'm always so grateful for all your support because it helps me become a better coach and as a better man myself. Today, we're going to talk about something I think we all can relate to. Guys and girls, young and old, single or even together in a relationship. And it's so interesting. When I was younger, let's just say back in the high school days, my first relationship to college relationship to maybe even my late 20s, early 30s, this word wasn't that popular around then. We were aware of it, but now through social media and certain dramatic approaches about dating and games and manipulation and tactics, this word has become such an everyday common word that we hear. And it's almost just casualized to a point, and we don't necessarily know where to go with it or why it's caused, but we repeat it like it's going out of style. The word is trigger. I feel triggered, coach. I'm getting triggered. Am I triggering you? Why does he trigger me all the time? For supposedly now we're back in the West. Everyone's got like ready to go. Everyone's triggered up, right? And that's so interesting because I never really heard that back in my earlier years of dating. But now it's a very common term. It's dropped daily. I hear it on all my stories, all my coaching sessions. Triggers, triggering, trigged. I just got trigged. What am I going to do? This ghosting trigged me. This question trigged me. Social media has trigged me. And as much as I was always trying to not just coach him in those situations, I kept on learning more and more about, do we even know what it means? Do we understand how to cope with it? Do we know where to go in the sense of when you understand what it is or why it is that's happening to you on how to act on it? That's where I coach. That's where my coaching comes in. There's 3 tools we're going to talk about today on what to do, how to handle a trigger. And again, it sounds simple, but it's very overlooked. It's very underrated in a sense of trying to separate with the fear to the fact. That's something I do as a coach. That's something I always tell my clients. What I do is I put facts on your fears to create direction. If we just lived every day with our thoughts or doubts or fears, we're not going to get much done. We have to have that drive, that ambition, that grit, that resilience to know which direction to go. You tell me the fact, and now I know there's something to go with, compared to just being based on a feeling or a fear, which can play games with us, can play games in our head, can keep you in a funk in a situation. And it might be unfortunate if you are getting triggered by someone or something and you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to act on it. So number 1 is name it. Give it a name. Literally, give it a name. Put it in bold caps, a name. If it's a person's name, if it's a place's name, if it's an item, if it's a feeling, I don't care. Whatever it is, give it a name on that specific moment, that specific triggering moment, that self-anxious, questionable, uncomfortable feel. I don't know why he said that. I don't feel like, it doesn't sound good. Something's going on here. Those hairs in your neck are growing up, that triggering, you know what I'm talking about. Give it a name. Literally give it a name. You don't have to share it with anyone. Give it a name so it brings awareness to who you are. Give it a name so it brings some, not just comfort, but familiarity on what that is. One thing I've learned as a coach and hearing all the stories, they'll tell me all these scenarios, they'll drop the word trigger, but the name is not established. It's just basically up in the air. It's in the gray area. It's not identified. And they kind of drift themselves in the situation where they have no direction. They don't have a name. They don't have a fact. So they kind of lose themselves and put themselves in this tailspin of negative thoughts, insecurities, self-doubt, victimizing, pointing the finger. All these things that we all have done, we all have done that, of course, but it's not healthy. It's not productive. It's not constructive to what to do. So name it to a point where it brings a familiarity if it does come again from who or when or how, that doesn't matter. But if it does come again, you're not so overwhelmed. It's not a shock. It's not a surprise. You're not like, where did this come from? This same trigger. No, it's that same name. It's that same person. It's that same situation. It's that same feeling. That feeling, that name, that place, that person now has a name. I've built it in my consciousness. I've established it in my subconscious mind. I'm familiar with it. I now know what it looks like, smells like, sounds like, tastes like. I'm not as scared. I'm uncomfortable. I'm kind of triggering, but I'm not as scared. I've become comfortable. I put a name to the bully. That's what I'm talking about. A lot of people use these words triggers and they don't know where to go with it. I want you to put a name to the bully, the name to that voice. I want you to put a name to it. And I want you to understand, why is that name always reoccurring? Why is that name on that feeling always reoccurring? Why is that name on that thing, the situation, that place? Places trigger people. Of course they do, especially if it's related towards exes or scenarios like that. Put a name on it. Create familiarity. Embrace it. Don't be terrified from it. Embrace it. Step up to it. If trigger was in the boxing ring, all it does is talk, but no bite. Bark, but no bite. What are you going to do about it? I want you to get in the ring and I want you to knock that trigger out. Because I want you to be strong enough to say, you're not going to direct me anymore. You're not going to scare me anymore. Maybe I might take a couple of hits. Maybe I'll get knocked down, but I'm going to get back up. That's what I do as a coach, to be aware, to accept and own your triggers by naming it. Give your opponent, that bully, a name. Number 2, on what to do when you are triggered. What to do when triggering happens in your life. Number 1 is name it. Number 2, seek the source. Seek the source. Number 1 is give it a name to create familiarity. In some way, uncomfortable comfortableness. Number 2, seek the source. Why do I always feel that name from that person? Why do I always feel that name or that trigger from this room, from this feeling, from this food, from this weather, this time of the month? Why? Maybe I had too much to drink. I didn't sleep enough. I'm working too much. I haven't exercised enough. Why? All these things. Where's the source of it? And that's when you start testing your accountability for your self-love. If it's a source that you can't control and it's based on someone else, that's where I come in as a coach, and I want you to evaluate, why am I allowing this? You deserve what you allow. And I don't mean to be insensitive, but you deserve what you allow. And I've heard too many stories. As frustrating as it is as a man, it inspires me as a coach when I hear all these women who I coach about, they still put up with this triggering relationship. They still put up with this triggering asshole. They still put up with this triggering person in their life, even ex-husband or whatever. And they still put up with it. And it starts to cloud and taint who they are. And it then eventually changes their whole representation in the dating world or their personal world of self-doubt. But they allowed it. They haven't sought the source, they haven't given a name, and they haven't established the boundaries and the standards of what's acceptable and what's not. And what's interesting about triggers, it's not about being right or wrong. What's right about boundaries and standards is there's only probably like a good, say, a handful of serious standards and boundaries. I mean, we can go all day about how many different boundaries someone has or standards, but I'm saying like probably a core of a handful of some serious deal breakers where you feel unsafe, disrespectful, disloyal, any in the other kind of sense of just like something that like, why am I even putting up with that? And that's when you seek the source. You stop blaming people. You stop pointing the finger. You stop playing the victim. You stop staying quiet. That's where, as a coach, I help you empower that voice. And it's not to a point where you have to be intimidating or demanding or even cold about it. But you need to be expressive about what it is that makes you uncomfortable from this place. Why do I get like this when I'm with him? Why do I feel like this every time I hear this from someone? seek the source. And let's work on that by giving it a name and then obviously the fellow steps that I'm going to talk about later in this video. But the main thing is for you to take accountability on why you are triggered. You don't have to be right or wrong. You don't have to explain to everyone. You don't have to justify. You don't have to validate. You don't have to do anything about it. But if you're not aware of it, then you're just kind of like driving around emotionally with no map. You're emotionally driving around with no map quest. You have no idea where you're going. And then when something comes up, car accident, red light, bad weather, you're just panic mode. What's going on? You're not prepared. I want you to be prepared. I want you to have an emotional map and a sense of triggers because we all got them. They can be personal, professional, or relationships. And that way you become just more in tune with who you are. And then that takes it to a different level where you see people for who they really are. This person enjoys triggering me. This person belittles me to make him feel big. Why am I dating this person? Why am I listening to the explanation? And on the flip side, you kind of come across someone who might be uplifting you, inspiring you, motivating you. I think we need to go more that way, with that direction in relationships. Number 3, on how to handle triggers. Number 1, give it a name. Number 2, seek the source. Number 3, beware of the projection. Beware of the projection. You gave it a name, you seek the source, you sought the source. Beware of the projection. The projection is meaning towards there's something stemmed from this trigger, from this situation, maybe through my childhood. There's something here that's triggering, projecting maybe towards my past marriage, maybe towards my ex-relationship. And it's very understandable. Everyone's got it. So don't be like, oh, I don't want to admit that. Everyone's got something. There's no perfect childhood, perfect marriage, perfect relationship. It's self-awareness and effort. That's all it is. So when you know there's a projection of something through childhood, past relationship, parenting relationship, be aware of that. Because in that way, you don't project and overblow that moment of being triggered because you know it stems from something else. You know it's about something else. And that to you is to a point where you accept it on what happened. You don't have to respect it. You don't have to like it. I'm sure it's not comfortable, but that way, and you have let's say a healing process of clarity and closure on what caused the situation from a childhood, marriage, relationship, to know that, wow, I'm working on owning that compared to running away from it. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to give the trigger a name. I'm going to seek the source to a point where I'm going to be protective towards my energy and who I hang around with, being selective. Why is this person always triggering me? Stop hanging out with that person. Sorry, just don't. You can put the phone down. You don't have to respond to text message. You can control that. Remember that. And then number 3, for whatever reason, if there's still some form of triggering happening in you, be aware of the projection. Where is it truly rooted from? And I know we get into like a little bit of psychology here, but this is very important because you don't want to be blind or blindsided just dating without knowing what you have as a trigger. We all got them. But the more you have a familiarity with them, the less terrified you are when they do come up. Because they're going to come up and it's never going to go away. You're always going to have some form of a trigger. That's the beautiful thing. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a beautiful thing to have a trigger, but the beautiful thing is take the approach and be proactive. Be aware of it. Be prepared. So you're not so surprised by something. And that way you kind of have a little more emotional stability, a little more management in your feelings to get through it compared to triggering yourself, sabotaging yourself. So I just want to say thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any questions about triggers or questions about a coaching session, send me a message. I'm always here to help. Thank you for watching. Take care.